There you go.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. As you know, this is in the veteran program series. Today is the fourth and the final session for this program. And we have a ton of interesting topics as we continue from our from first step RPA program when we started with the basics. And then now we come down to few advanced practices. So before we go further down, just a brief introduction for our panel today. Chris, he was presenting yesterday. He couldn't join today because of some engagements. I have Jeremy here, UiPath MVP and a veteran himself, an awesome person. Got a chance to meet with him during our MVP meetup this year. Loved it. Tracy is 5 times MVP, very experienced, and she's a excellence, operational excellence partnership lead for Centric. Myself, Pradeep Shukla. I am chief technologist for Peraton, also MVP for UiPath. I love participating these sessions and being part of the community and delivering and sharing our knowledge is one of my passion. And last but not the least, Diana, you heard before from her. She is the glue that keeps everyone together here. So let's jump in for our session. So this is a high-level agenda. I broke it down into 2 chapters, if you will, because there was too many things in the agenda. So I couldn't find them how to group it together so we can have uh, least handovers from slides to demo, so just to keep things organized. The first chapter will be primarily on a concept, string manipulation. Anywhere if you get into our automation or any programming construct, string objects are there, that whether it's date level manipulation or long text that you have to manipulate, you have to find text from a large sentence. So all that kind of nifty stuff that you have to do. So UiPath has a very rich library for that. We'll talk about briefly. Um, and that will provide a foundation for the demo as well. We'll also talk about debugging and error handling in Studio, which is a backbone of a solid programming workflow. When we are delivering solutions, error handling is the key cornerstone for any robust solution. Chapter 2, where we'll go and look into more orchestrator side of the business. We'll look at email automation briefly. There are a ton of concepts within Orchestrator. Orchestrator is the platform, the web server of UiPath ecosystem, if you will, that helps organize and manage different assets. And there are concepts for queues and how we use them, how we build a project and publish it, so that we can consume it and put that automation in production. So I know there's a lot to cover, but we'll go bit by bit. Again, this is primarily just a kind of introduction for all these concepts. So we'll touch upon these things at a very high level, but I would encourage each and every one of you, when you do dive into it, feel free to reach out to us, either through the community itself, forums. You can tag us. We are already there on the forum. If you just want to talk to one of us, you can just put @symbol, type in Jeremy, type in Pradeep or Tracy. You can tag us. That way we directly get notified for that particular question that you may be looking for. But believe me, our forum is a happening place. There are almost always hundreds of folks are online. So anytime you post a question, uh, it's one of the least cases that you won't get a response within an hour or so. Usually most of these get answered pretty quick. So all right, with that being said, I will hand it over to Tracy to cover our first part for string manipulation and debugging and error handling. Over to you, Tracy.
All right. So string manipulation. You guys may be familiar with basic concepts for this, and should you ever need to look anything up, you can look up any vb.net reference material and find lots of information on this. You can also use some of the autopilot features within the tool set, or ChatGPT. Those are all good references. I think we're getting to the point that we don't have to look up the old manuals from years ago anymore. But string manipulation means that you're taking some type of text and doing something with it. In this case, the author's name that needs to be done differently. You guys see the example on screen. And you're able to take that text and do something with it. So this is being popped up into a message box. You can see the assign activity that we talked about earlier this week, and the information assigned, and something needs to be done differently here. And this will happen quite a lot. You're often going to be doing things with strings like breaking them apart by certain characters, taking a certain length of them or position, those types of things. So this is an example of that, of generic string manipulation, which you'll be doing a whole lot of. But definitely encourage you to not have to worry about memorizing all of this functionality and to look up whatever you need to. So here's some examples of some of that. Trim is a pretty common thing. If you're gathering information from, say, a website, for example, you can be gathering a table of information. A lot of times it will come with some extra stuff that you may not really want to use. Some of it being characters that you can't see, that can make it difficult to follow things along the way. So here are some examples of common things. Again, do not worry about memorizing all of this stuff. The reference material is there for you if you want to look it up. It's also there in the UiPath documentation, and fairly easy to ask the question to any of our little AI friends that can help provide it for you. So in these examples, trim is we'll go back one real quick.
Sure.
Trim just takes away some of the extra characters before and after. To lower and to upper are examples of taking text and making it either uppercase or lowercase, splitting it. Pretty common to get several things in a list. So say apples, bananas, and oranges, and you want to have a series of 3 things that you can handle instead of having it all together in one field. That's what split does. And you guys might notice the little tiny C afterward. That means a character that requires splitting by one character and noting it. If you just put a string out there, even if it is a single character, sometimes that can, depending on what version you're using, can cause an error for you if you don't put that C character where it's required as a single character. So that's what that is. Contains just means that text contains whatever string you're looking for, and it'll return a true or false. Length chops it off at a certain length. In this case, you want to trim to 12 characters, where you take the 12 characters, the first ends with and starts with. I won't go through all of these, but you get the idea. And then substring takes a portion of the string, and there's a few different variations of that. But again, not anything you have to memorize. And then replace will take one piece of text and replace it with something else. So pretty common as you're naming files, things like that, to be able to replace a name. Say you've got the name of some type of key that you want to put in a file name each time. So replacing that is a pretty common thing with the data that you get specific to whatever you're working with. All right. So some more common activities. We talked about the splitting. Let's see, modifying text. And these are built-in activities. You can also use assign statements for just about anything. Some of these make it a little bit easier. So in the text left to right, you're getting text like it says left to right until the first occurrence of whatever you're looking for. So say I want to find up unto the first comma, that can help me do that if I select that as my separator, and I'll get that information before or after it. You can put a variable in either of those or both if you so choose. So it takes some of the work out of it, of you having to come up with the syntax for the activity yourself. Modifying text. This could be examples of some of the different functions that we talked about on the prior page, like the replace function, for example. Say we have a file name and we've got a particular path and have a placeholder that says key for the specific identifier we want, it would be pretty common to replace the word key with, given index or variable that you're using throughout, so you know exactly which piece of information you are working with. And then this changes a type. So types would be strings, integers, booleans, lots of different things. And this helps you to change that type from one to the other. That could still cause errors potentially if it's not valid. So say you're changing a string that says yes to Boolean, which is true or false. It may not necessarily work out for you. So you have to be careful that you're following the rules related to that particular type. All right, this is me as well.
I can do that. That's fine. Thank you, Tracy. All right, so let's jump into debugging for studios. Okay, so now that we have written code, right, the next step is how we debug this code. So UiPath provides a whole host of features. If you have used any other IDE, it's equivalent to that. So you have ways to go through the code or jump a particular line, highlight an element, put a breakpoint. There are a ton of those features are out there. The screen may look quite busy because it's just trying to highlight each and every action that is available to you to provide, but it provides you all those features right at your hand. You can look at logs, you can open log, you can add log activities, you can define what elements you want to highlight, and you can also look at the execution trail. So we'll look at some of these in our demo, then that will make it more clear how we use that. Similarly, continuing from the debugging itself, the next step would be when we are going through code step by step. There are instances where we want to put a breakpoint. Breakpoint in a code is primarily serves multiple purposes, right? When we are debugging, we want to know at certain stage there is an error. So I want to maybe put a breakpoint just before it or just after it. I want to check a variable. I want to make sure that data is available for the next activity to process. So in those instances, we use breakpoints. Step into and step over. Step into is kind of getting inside a function. If you want to get inside a workflow, we use a step into. Step over, if we want to skip it, we can skip a particular method or particular activity and then go to the next one. Um, when we are performing debugging, we have options as well. We can retry, restart, focus, all those kind of, those are certain features that are part of all your debug tab itself. So I'll show you where it is, and I also run through a scenario where we are trying to debug a code, so we can quickly look at it, how that works. This is again will help you familiarize not just with the editor UiPath Studio, but it will also help you improve your code and be able to quickly identify where the errors are and how you can identify the specifics so that you can fix it and will obviously take care of those issues. Uh, the next stage that comes besides that top bar on Studio, the next set of tools that are available to a developer are panels. These panels have ton of information, and each of these panels serves a different purpose. So there's a locals panel, which is available only in the debug mode. And what it does, it actually shows you the exceptions, arguments, properties, variables of the steps that the code is executing. So you can look at it, we can look at it when we are doing, when we are debugging and having a breakpoint in the code. We'll walk over each of these steps in our demo. Watch panel is another set of section where we can see the value of variables and arguments, and we can keep and watch. If you are running a long running process where the automation is going through multiple scenarios, think of a loop. If it is running through a loop, you may want to observe when a particular variable reaches to a certain point, right? For example, if my variable goes above 10, then I want to watch it. So what you can do, you can put the variable in the watch, you can define a parameter, and then it will inform you in the debug process or in the even run process as well. Immediate panel is inspecting for data points while debugging. Call stack panel is actually, as the name suggests, right? It's a call stack. So it will show you the sequence of steps that automation has gone through. So each and every step, you know, what was the previous step that executed and what was the previous step to that previous step. So the whole track is available to you for review. Now let's come back to error handling techniques. This is again a little bit advanced concept, but it is something that's required to when we are developing a robust application. Uh, we define code within blocks, which is called try-catch block, commonly known as in every programming construct. These are kind of fundamental to a programming itself. So you can see on the right hand side, in UiPath, you don't have to write it out. There are activities available that are pre-built. So you just have to feed your code into it. The structure is already in place. What it does, it actually helps you rather than stopping the application, right? All of a sudden, it will provide you an option for a graceful exit or provide you a way to manage the error scenario. So that's where try, catch, throw, rethrow, all those concepts will come in picture. And again, I'm just touching these concepts at a very high level because these concepts are itself require a lot more discussion, a lot more in-depth analysis to understand and put in practice. But this is here, I'm just presenting here so you are aware of it. When you are going through uh, the course, the associate developer course, you would have a ton of material on this and practice samples that you can work with. All right, so that being said, let me pull my uh, application here. This is a very simple application that we are going to run through and look at some of the samples for string manipulation and also debugging. So this automation does a very simple string manipulation work, but we'll walk through how debugging is also involved in it. So it's a single page workflow here. Primarily what we are doing, we are reading through a text file where employee details are available, his first name, last name, that kind of stuff. This automation will read that text file and it will pick up those values, first name, last name. It will use text to left and right. This is one of the activities we saw in the slide deck. We are going to take first name, we are going to pick up last name from the file. We'll add those fields into a text where we modify it. We use trim left, trim right to cut out extra spaces from the variables. After that, we concatenate all of that into one single file and then we publish the output. So let me run this and then we'll come back and we'll go over it one more time. So let me do this. So when we click on I clicked on debug. So this will run in the debug mode when compiling activities, code, and everything. Once that compilation is done, we will directly look at the output here. What output comes out to be? Uh, okay. Interestingly, the output jumps on my different screen. So this is the output that comes out. So after this automation, what it did, it found Mr. John Doe. We would like to invite you to our product launch event next week. Please confirm by end of the week. So what it did, it actually was, the purpose was, I have a customer list in a separate file. So I'm picking up customer list from there and I'm adding generic text to it, combine it, and then I show the response. So it did several things, right? It read through the text file, it extracted the values from it, first name, last name. It did some string manipulation in terms of removing any empty spaces, putting them in a proper format, and then combining the whole text into a single output and be able to present it here. So we run this again. So now that execution is complete, so we know that, okay, this automation works for what is intended purpose is. Now what I want to do, I want to look at debugging. How, if there is an issue, how I'm going to debug this, all right? So before we go and start looking in the code, I want to bring your attention over here on the top panel here. So you see home design. Whenever you open your UiPath Studio, create your first automation, you'll always be in the design section of it. When you're running to go into debug, there is a separate section for debugging. And these are some of the features we talked about. Even in the slides, you can see step into, step over, step out. There are breakpoints. You can define slow steps. Sometimes the automation runs very fast. You can slow down the execution of it. And obviously, there are other information here, like you can look at the execution trail, highlights, and all that good stuff. So let me put a breakpoint here. So I can put a breakpoint. All right. So if your breakpoint already there, it actually, it's a toggle. So it takes it out and the same button will add it back. All right. So we are ready. Let's get to debug. All right. So having a breakpoint means I'm going to stop here. Whenever my automation will stop here at the breakpoint, it has executed up till this point and it's waiting for me to give it the next instruction. Now, I have various options. You can see this became continue from debug point. So I can continue, I can stop, I can step into, step over. I have all these options. I can even restart it, right? So before we go out and try these things, I want to bring your attention to these different panels I talked about, the locals panel. So locals panel has all the variables over here. It also shows you the variable value at current point of time, what the value it has. And it also gives you properties to assign. It also provides modified text. So modified text is this particular activity. So it's talking about this activity, what variable and other properties that can be modified here. So it's a very handy tool for a developer. When we are debugging through, we want to monitor the variables and the values for it. So we can always come and look at it. Similarly, watch is another one. Watch is something where in locals, if you see, it already takes care of the variables, right? So the previous variables, previous activity variables, and the current activity variables. But in watch, you can choose what variable you want to actually follow along. So let's say I want to follow this particular variable. I want to know the value of this variable at any point of time. So once I add it, whenever I run this many times, I will always have this here and I can check the value of it. I can click on this magnifying glass. It will open up a big watch window. I can read the whole text over here. All right. So next is immediate window. So immediate window is when we are running through the operation, I will get the values over here. And call stack we already look at. So you can see this call stack here, the main string activities, modified text to placebook. So that tells me the call stack or the sequence of the execution that it's going through. Now, if I want to continue this automation, I just have to click on continue and I should get my pop-up here. There it is. So that's the output for the message box. So that's a quick demo for various debugging options that we have available in the tool, in the IDE, and also the string manipulation. So that being said, let's continue for the next step. All right, so next chapter 2 will consolidate mainly around orchestrator assets. And we'll also look at how we send emails through automation. So
Before you
UiPath
dive
Pro,
in,
yeah.
Pradeep, I saw a question in the chat. Someone mentioned
Sure.
that if you're working with a secured text variable versus just a plain text variable, and it's supposed to be secure information like a login, will that information be presented in the locals panel as it works through, or will that information be missing?
It will be missing. You
Okay.
cannot you cannot see that value over there. And there are some best practices around it, how you actually maintain those secure values, right? What type of secure string, primarily if it is a credential or some login credentials for that matter, then there are different ways to do it rather than just using a plain secure string option. But
Thanks,
that's a
Pradeep.
good question. That's a great
Yep.
question.
Agree. That's why I wanted to jump in real
Yeah.
quick before you continued.
No, thank you. All right. So let's quickly go over this for email automation. So there are multiple packages available within Studio for performing email automation. That's kind of have become very common feature using automation, sending or receiving emails or monitoring your mailbox. That's kind of a very standard use case. There are multiple mail activity packages. These packages are all available out of the box within Studio. So you have IMAP, POP3, SMTP. IMAP is primarily for, SMTP is for sending emails. IMAP and POP3 are primarily for receiving emails. Then you have Office 365 package, but that changes the whole thing. Prior to Office 365 integrations, we had to build all these things within the code. But now with UiPath integration services available, that becomes much more easier. So it's a one step further than what we used to build with mail activity packages. UiPath does support Google Workspace activity packages as well, so you can use them as well. You can use G Suite integration and build your automation through that if you're using Google Workspaces for email uh, for your organization. Yeah, so this is just a brief in terms of what these protocols are, how they work. And IMAP is more customizable compared to POP3. If you are using like native Gmail integration, you'll be using POP3 most probably, or it's better with UiPath. At least you can use G Suite integration. That takes care of the one of the very basic problem. Even when I'm building automation, is usually the passwords. With password security policies, every organization has those changing passwords, revolving passwords, right? So you don't want to have all that ingrained in the code. Integration service, I see that as the best solution out there, even better than having credentials in assets and other things. But yeah, let's continue with that. So that was so now let's talk about Orchestrator. Orchestrator is a fundamental backbone for the automation itself. When you do build automation, you can have a standalone automation on your machine, running all by itself, just doing some productivity tasks for you. But if you do want to leverage it at an organizational level, that's where Orchestrator comes in picture. And even within Orchestrator, uh, we're not going to go through all of this today. We'll just touch high level at few key concepts. And then once you go through the course, the the associate developer course, you would have more in-depth information about it. But let's touch upon the primary concept. So orchestrator assets. Assets, think of them as a configuration values, like in a program where you can put configuration values in a spreadsheet and tie it with the program, deploy it. It gets stuck because it's not dynamic. You cannot change it. Sometimes if you're putting those configuration values within code, you may have to rebuild the automation as well. So assets provides us a way where we can keep these configuration values at the orchestrator level, and your automation is leveraging those, but it doesn't have to depend on it. So you can change the orchestrator values depending on which particular environment you're running, or you can have different configuration for dev and test environment, for production environment, all that kind of stuff you can do. So that's where assets come in picture. These are just a straightforward object. You can declare these assets. There are multiple types of assets. We'll go over that as well. There are two primarily functions that we work with on assets: getting an asset or getting a credential. So these are, so I was touching upon briefly on the credential side of it, right? So if you do want to have your username password in the system, rather than having them in a secure string, right? You would prefer to use assets for that. You can create a credential type asset where you can keep your login information, and the automation can fetch that information in the runtime. And you are free to update those passwords, credentials at any point of time as required. So that's where assets become really handy That's just one use case. There are several other use cases. You can have assets of different types, integer, string type. You can create those assets. All right, so let's jump on to the queues. So queue, as the name suggests, it's a list of items that I have to work on. So think about in an automation, you want to go through 10 different packages or 10 different files that you want to run through. So how are you going to make it automated so that it's less work for the developer to create them, but at the same time, you have a very transactional level control over the objects that you're working on. So that's where the concept of queues comes in. So it enforces uniqueness. Every queue item gets processed by itself. You can scale the queue items, having multiple robot licenses associated with it. So for example, like I was working for a customer where we were processing insurance claims. Okay. So at any point of time, there are thousands of insurance claims that teams are processing. So essentially, the idea is primarily to build a queue of those insurance and then let the robot pick one item at a time and then process it. And since these are high volume use cases, you may assign multiple robots to pick from the same queue. That way you can really expedite the whole process. The automation that with one robot that may take hours and hours or even days, having multiple robots can improve your time to completion. And obviously, since these executions are happening at a queue level with each queue item, you have much more granular metrics, right? You're not just because one queue item fails, you're not failing the overall queue. You can still process rest of it, let one process fail, that's fine. Then you can build a human in the loop uh, that where a human reviewer can come in and fix the problem. So when we do build queues, I think I briefly touched upon it. We talk about a concept of dispatcher and performer, where dispatcher is the first stage where it picks a source of information and creates queue items. And performer is the automation that picks each of these queue items and processes it. This is the core concept of RE framework, which you would go through in your developer associate program briefly. So you'll know that how to build enterprise level transactional automation system. It's a core to it. We are not going into too much detail of it. So I'll just go over these. This is just a high level how you break down that automation program to build a dispatcher and a performer. More complex system have much more variations of it, but you'll see this pattern following with most of the transactional automation process. So yeah, so it's the same thing for we are talked about dispatcher in the first slide. Now we're talking about performer, how it can take each queue item and go through the process itself. All right. So now that your automation is ready, the next step is how to publish it. So publishing part is very easy, at least to start with, right? When you are doing just from your own machine directly, you can directly publish from the studio itself. There is a publish button that will ask you few questions like package name, what version you want to provide, publishing options, which will ask whether you want to directly publish to the orchestrator or you want to publish to local folder. That set of options that you'll have. Well, now the publish is done. So the next step comes to be how you deploy it. So once uh, kind of publishing and deployment goes hand in hand in a development environment. But when we go to test environment or production environment, that's where deployment becomes very crucial for a successful deployment of the process. You have to look at a few things like how you define your folder structure, where you put that package, what versions it would require, and user permissions and all that will come along with it. So again, this is just a high level concept, but these are the steps for an automation to become production ready, right? So you have to build your code, then you publish it. After publishing, you go to the deployment stage. All right, so that brings to us on the demo for this particular section. Jeremy, are you ready?
Hey there, Pradeep. I don't have a good orchestrator instance with a lot of automations. I noticed that you had built something. Do you have that published to your orchestrator? When I was trying to log in, my orchestrator instance on cloud was to a different one. I'm not sure if you have another version.
Hold on, let me.
Because when I
So
logged into the cloud orchestrator I have, there's actually 0 automations that I've published in that instance. I don't know if it's tracking some other email.
well, that's all right. Let me see, and I can publish here the sample, the Excel code that we looked at it. I'll go over
That's what I
that
was,
and
yeah,
I'll
that's what I was
publish it
thinking.
and
That
I'll
might.
go over that.
And
So
as he
that's
pulls
not,
this up too, right? Just wanted to kind of reiterate the importance of working through like an orchestrator. I know you guys saw this as in examples with Andreas when he previously showed you guys the first and second day, how we kind of maneuvered through here in the panels. But the importance is in this example of insurance, to give you a sneak peek, I worked for a company in San Antonio called SWBC, and we did a lot of insurance work as well. And one of the things that we had to do was go out every year and look to see if someone's insurance has expired. The only issue with this is that there were multiple business B2B websites or portals that we had to enter. And so when you're building your automation, you're thinking about it, as Tracy mentioned in the chat, as you're designing your solution, you want to consider the scalability, as Pradeep mentioned. How quickly can you process 1,000 transactions? And if you do the math, right, I think if you do one transaction every minute for 24 hours, it's only around 1,400 transactions. And so if you have something like Pradeep mentioned, where there's 2,000 transactions, there's no way for you to get that work done with one queue and one robot, right? And so that's why it's important to understand what orchestrator brings to the table as far as assets, and he'll give you a quick understanding. How do you go from what he's doing here and he's built to get it into orchestration?
yeah, absolutely. So those considerations are always key for building a successful solution. So we talked about assets and queues. So let's look at assets. So here assets, it's pretty empty here. So let's create a new asset. So when we are creating a new asset, let's pull that up. And I can define this asset as whatever. Let's say email login, or not email login, email password. I don't want to, my login is fine. Then you can see here in type, we have text, Boolean, integer, and credential. Credential is the one that's most commonly used, but these are other assets as well that you can use. For example, you may want to, if you're going through an internal system where you have multiple websites that you're going, you may want to put that website here. Well, the concept is a little bit in a way where you are actually, rather than hitting a public website, you're hitting internal servers, right? So what essentially happen, a potential website can be load balanced across multiple servers. Okay, and then again, I'm going into too much technical, but those are the situations where you can create a text type credential. You don't want to expose that information in the code or anywhere else, so you can just keep it here. But credential is a very good example where you can create this. And this will ask you to provide your username and password. Okay, so you can have any of your credentials logged out here. Once you create that, you can use all of these credentials back in the code with get credential. That will fetch the username password. That way you're not keeping any of that information in the automation. So it's everything in created as an asset, and you can come back and change, or essentially the tenant admin would have this role to manage these assets active and current. So in case if you have an organization policy where passwords change every 90 days, usually that's a standard everywhere. So you can come back here and update it and good to go without having any direct impact to the automation itself. So that's asset. Uh, let's go back to queues. So I don't have queue example, but I'll still talk about that. So, all right, so creating a new queue. So if you look at it, the standard creation is very simple. I would not go into other areas because it goes into too much details of, okay, you can manage even an SLA for queue, right? You don't want a queue to be active for more than 24 hours. Means if a task has been picked, task has been added for the automation to process, if within 24 hours the bots are not able to go through or complete, then they should be discarded. So some of those lines you can define a SLA for queue. But what queue provides a mechanism to add multiple data points for your automation. Okay, so it's kind of a dictionary. If you're aware of a dictionary variable or dictionary type object, you can add into it. So let's say you want to run. Let me think about a very simple example. So let me, if I want to create an automation, right, that uh, that can generate top 5 places to visit in a country. So I can create a queue. I can put 5 countries into it. Okay, and then I have the same automation that goes through, reads through each item in that queue and picks up that item, goes to Google and just does a simple search. Top 5 places in Rome, top 5 places in Indonesia, top 5 places in South Africa, something like that. Just an example, right? So that name of the country, it becomes part of the queue. You have the same automation. You don't have to write that automation again and again, but just by adding additional queue items, you can have an automation that can give you top 5 visiting places for across the world, right? You just your how many countries you want to add, that's the limit. Right? So it's unlimited. So that's the scalability of queues.
So I had a question, Pradeep. If we're talking about queues in this essence where they're able to kind of act as a dictionary and then execute, is there a scenario like maybe I have a runtime process where those assets you were just speaking of, I don't know them when I start? Is there a way that I can trigger a queue item and then it would get me that top 5 list, and then that list be used as an asset for another process? Is that something that's possible here?
Well, that will create an automation itself, right? Means you can extract the values and then you can create an automation that creates an asset. So programmatically, we can create an asset through UiPath code. So all the values that we get from the queue, they can be fed into that loop where you go create an asset. And then obviously the next automation that comes in that can use those assets to move forward or to process the next steps.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that answer.
All right. So that's queue. So let's go over the publishing part of it, because that's the essence here. So how we publish and how we deploy. So this is my code. It's a very simple code. I am happy with the automation. So now I want to publish it. So I'm going to go here. This is the publish menu for me as a developer. And again, what I'm talking about here will be only at a developer level, because if I'm talking about test environment and production environment, there will be a slight difference in terms of how we publish it, because that will have much more governance around it. And definitely you have to follow the CI/CD for your organization, whatever policies they have to go over. So if in a simple way, I can just click on this publish, and what it does, it checks for project for validation errors, it analyzes project. There are a few other utilities available within Studio to actually verify your workflow, which is called Workflow Analyzer. But it's not today's topic to go into that level of detail. So we'll stick here. So our current version by default starts with 1.0.0. This is a new version that it will provide. You can even manage your releases as pre-release if you're in that build cadence. But otherwise, I'll leave it here. Let's go to the next one. This is the name. So this is fine. So now we have here multiple options. We have here tenant process feed, personal workspace feed, and a custom feed. I'll talk about briefly. Tenant process feed, if we select tenant's process feed, means this automation will be available in the tenant for all the users. So anyone who has a role or who is assigned in your tenant can use this automation. So in a way, if you want to create an automation that you want other users to use, you can use tenant process feed and share it that way. Personal workspace feed is for your own personal execution. So let's say you're developing, you are still testing it, you're not sure that it's ready for others to look at it, then you always keep it in your personal workspace feed. So that automation will come in the personal workspace. And I'll show you both. I can show you both how it works. So let's start with the personal workspace and then we'll come back to tenant. So, and it's as simple as that. There is nothing more configuration to do because once you start your UiPath Studio, you are already connected with the orchestrator tenant, which you can see over here. The green dot means I have an active license and I am connected to my orchestrator. Yeah. So I have selected my tenant workspace feed. I don't want to put a custom URL here, so I'm all good. Let's move on to the next step. This is called certificate signing. This concept is another advanced concept where we want our automation to be signed through either third-party certificate authority or we have our own certificate internally. So we'll leave it for now and we'll just click on publish. So while it's doing some steps, compiling activities, preparing it, and very soon we will get the message that this is available for us. So it's building, publishing, and we saw that it is published successfully. So and so version number. So let's take a look at it. Where did it go? All right. So we come here and we see there is something over here. And there it is. So this is our use case that we just published here. So this is the version 1.0.1 medium unattended string manipulation, and I can explore this package. Again, these are some additional features. You can look at it, how the automation is created. Once you get a little bit in depth, these all options will make more sense in terms of why they are there and what the purpose of it.
Noticed a
You
question in the chat too, Pradeep. Someone asked, why does the package show up as unattended?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so usually because I have unattended license activated here, so that's why it's picked up that as an execution type. But yes, this automation and the beauty of unattended is if it is set up as unattended, you can use it as attended as well. It's not stopping you. So I can open my attended, my assistant, and look at that too.
And as he pulls that up too, if you're familiar with the terms attended versus unattended, right? Unattended means it's meant to operate in the background, doesn't require human intervention, at least not built in. There's ways to send a queue item, right, to action center for somebody to action on. But generally speaking, it's not required to anybody to be there. And attended means that you generally need somebody to support or, sign off or approve certain things. And he's about to show you here. Here's an example of where you can take an unattended and still make it an attended solution.
Yeah. So we can see here this automation is available on my assistant, but it's still awaiting install. So I'll just click on this. So it gets installed here and I can run this from my assistant as well, which is
So if you
using
had like a
attended
dev
license.
tenant on there, Pradeep, would this be something if I publish it to that development or QA tenant that everybody on the QA team would now be able to execute it themselves like this?
Yeah, so right now this is in my personal workspace. So this is only exposed to me.
Okay.
No one else would have access to it. If I want to publish this as where I want to share it, I will go and primarily publish this in the tenant process feed. So that way it actually comes here in the shared and it will be available to all the users who are mapped to this shared folder location. So that's where the deployment comes into picture, what you talked about briefly in terms of tenants. Yes. So right now I have one single tenant, but I can divide, I can create multiple tenants for developers, for testers, for production. And then I can use it across. And the third option we looked, so let me, before I jump out there, let me just execute it quickly over here. So you can see in my assistant, this is now installed. So I can run it from here directly. And it's pretty quick, simple automation, so it wouldn't take much time. It's all done. There it is. So that's the message box that we saw before. Click on OK, and it will get completed. Now that we have ran this once, this is where another useful benefit of having an orchestrator. Now I can actually have a metrics. Now this is just one execution, so it shows me one execution. But if I have multiple executions, I have a kind of a uh, I would say a baseline dashboard where I can have multiple automations running and I can look at the history. So if I look at same way, if I go in my shared, I can look here. And this again, it shows data in terms of last 30 days or something. So if you don't have any execution, you won't see it. But if you have executions, you'll have more information here. All right, so let's go back to the studio itself. So we did our publish. The other option is if we publish it with different configuration rather than doing personal workspace. If we do tenant feed, then it will be available here. The concept of folders is very unique in a way because that also governs your deployment mode. You can create as many folders as you want to, and it provides a logical separation of users in a way. You can, so if you create an automation, you want only certain set of users to have access to it, you can create a separate folder altogether and configure it that way. If you want something to available for everyone, then you just keep it under shared. Shared is a default folder location that is available to all the users until unless you change their permissions. I mean, that's again some administrative features that primarily your orchestrator admin should monitor. So yeah, so that's a very high level basic publishing and deployment model that you can at least to start with. That is sufficient. Will have you going and start leveraging your orchestrator. There are a ton of other features on the orchestrator sides. Feel free to explore, look at monitoring, and you can monitor multiple things, not just the process. You can monitor queues if you have additional queues. Um, so that gives you a very healthy account of your environment where the automations are running. All right, I think we are almost top of the hour.
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, no, yeah. If you have any questions, definitely throw them in the chat. I know that Pradeep, Tracy, and team would love to answer them. I see one that came in and was asking this overview with some of this data. Is there ways to manipulate it, or could I add additional widgets to this, or is this pretty stock how this view looks?
No, you can actually, it provides you some of the newer view is over here where you can organize. If you are using, you can mark them favorite. So like home orchestrator is marked as favorite for me. I can mark document understanding as favorite. So I can always, they are available at the top. Other, if you can look at these classifications for build, discover, operate, these are also um, standard package or standard design for this. Uh, in terms of if you're asking about this dashboard, if I can edit it, there is limited editing capabilities. Like you can change, you can look at different days. You can filter by 30 days or week or something like that. But most of this is actually out of the box that is available to us. If you are interested in some advanced analytics as such, then for that, actually, you should be using UiPath Insights that provides you full-fledged capability. You can create your own metrics, ROI metrics, business value metrics, and all that stuff. That's pretty advanced, similar to Tableau. If you have any experience with Tableau, you can relate to that. Some of our customers do use Tableau and they export all that data to Tableau. But having in UiPath Insights has its own added advantage because you don't have to build integration and manage all that.
Yeah,
across to a
and
third
that view
party.
too, right? The one that you were sharing, it's more of a critical path type snapshot, right?
Right.
You want to log into your orchestrator, see if anything's crashing and burning. That's where you could do it. And as you mentioned, Insights is probably the go-to platform for analytics or dashboarding. And when it comes to that, right, you have capabilities to kind of, adjust that. But as he said, other companies use different types of stuff. So,
Right.
um, and again, if any of these questions pop up post this session, feel free to connect with Pradeep, Tracy. I know they shared their LinkedIn and their socials in the chat, so feel free to connect with these experts. They'll answer questions. More importantly, get in the forums, right? The forums, as
Yeah.
Pradeep mentioned, there are millions, literally millions of people who troll the forums, and they love the competition to answer questions. I have an example at the same company I was mentioning, SWBC, when I was building my first RPA solution over a decade ago. I didn't know what I was doing. I don't have a computer science background. And the automation, what it was doing, as Tracy was talking about string manipulation, there's this concept called pad left or pad right. And I was getting numbers coming in with a bunch of leading zeros, and UiPath would chop them off. But I had no idea this was happening, right? And so I posted the question in the forum, and I had a automation that needed to go in production in less than 12 hours. Some gentleman from Europe had answered exactly what I needed, and my process was up and running. So get in the forum. He has it
Right.
shown here. Super simple, forum.uipath.com. Post your questions there. People will definitely respond if it's technical in nature. But Diane,
Yeah.
I know, Pradeep, did you have anything in closing before you gave it back to the community manager?
No, I think the only thing I have after this is some of the standard academy access. So go back to uh, join the veterans program, definitely go through the associate developer course. That this whole training or four sessions that we did is actually based on that. So, but that program has a lot more content. So you can definitely go in depth because we only touched very high level concepts for UiPath. With that being said, yeah, I'm grateful for everyone staying here. Over to you, Dinah.
Yeah, thank you guys. This is a great session. So this rounds up this session. This was on Studio, as Pradeep mentioned. We're going to have other training sessions throughout the year. We're going to have guest speakers, people from UiPath who will talk about their service and what they do in their roles at UiPath. We also would like to hear from you guys, so we'd love to get your success stories. If you've been working in automation, we'd love to do a session where we can just find out what you guys are doing, not only for yourself, but to help other vets down the road. And then just so you're also aware, I am starting a business analyst associate program on December 2nd. It's a brand new curriculum. It's a brand new certification. So if you are interested at all in business analyst certification, I highly recommend you join it. It's going to be 5 sessions, 2 sessions per week, Mondays and Wednesdays, for about an hour and a half. But it's very quick, and we have amazing support and experts that will guide you through it. So if you want to take advantage of that, please do. And then what I'll be doing is co-hosting certain things on the veterans chapter. So as Pradeep mentioned, please join the chapter. But from time to time, we'll be tagging you on other content that's available. And then if you want to do anything or get a hold of me, or have any ideas of how we can build this chapter, we're always open to great ideas. This is our community, but it's your community too. So please feel free to join us. And I'm putting my my email address there in chat for you guys. So yeah, so we hope to see you again soon on December 9th, where Jeremy and I and a couple of others will just be going through the community, the benefits that it has, and things that you might want to consider. And all the things we're doing are for free. So there's nothing expected. This is all just for you. So we enjoyed having you guys this week, and look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so much, Diana. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Pradeep. Sorry.
No, no, no. That's wonderful. I just wanted to add, I'm sure everyone knows that community edition is free too. So
Yeah,
don't be afraid. Download the code, download the platform, play it around. So don't be
absolutely.
afraid. It's just one step, and there are a ton of materials, YouTube videos, even community YouTube channel. Diana,
Yes,
that has ton of content for all previous sessions going back to like even
Absolutely.
2, 3 years back. So you can build your own playlist, or you can pick up any suggested playlist from there. So there's a lot of resource out there available. You have to make your mind to take a dive. That's all it is.
agreed. It's the upside's massive. Thank you again, Diana, for orchestrating this. Tracy, Pradeep, Chris,
Thank you.
Andreas, Mason, Naveen, Ravi. We had so many I think Rashmi was involved as well. Devi I saw her as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to the community managers for supporting this veterans program. It means a lot to me personally, being a veteran and a part of the community. So you guys step up and support this in major ways. So thank you for this pilot session. You guys' support has been through the roof. Thank you, Diana, for this. Really means a
Thanks.
lot to me too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See you again.
All
Bye.
right. See you later.